Welcome back. Blood is thicker than water, but in Hartford, the sterling blood is pure toxic waste. 5 years ago, my family threw me into a blizzard after my sister framed me as a drug-addicted sociopath to protect an empire built on corpses. They thought I was dead. They were wrong. I didn't die. I learned how to dissect lies. Tonight, my ER received a level 1 trauma. Selena, their golden child, rotting from the inside out, poisoned by the very chemicals my father spent decades hiding. Now my parents are begging Dr. Sterling for a miracle. They don't realize I'm not entering this OR to save a life. I'm entering it to perform an execution of the past. Welcome home, Dad. The surgery begins now. Stay until the end to see the true cost of their empire, and like and subscribe.
The thing about perfect families is that they're built on perfect lies. I learned this on a November evening in 2017 when snow was just beginning to dust the windows of Sterling Manor, and my father stood at the head of our dining table like a king surveying his kingdom. The chandelier above us, a monstrosity of crystal that had hung there since my grandmother's time, cast fractured light across the mahogany surface, catching on the edges of wine glasses and silver forks arranged with military precision. To family, he said, raising his glass. To legacy, my mother echoed him, her smile as polished as her pearls. My sister lifted her glass with the practiced grace of someone who spent her whole life being one. And I hesitated just for a fraction of a second, my fingers rolled against the stem. That hesitation would cost me everything, but I'm getting ahead of myself. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please stay with me until the end, because what I'm about to tell you isn't just my story. It's a diagnosis of something wrong that runs deeper than blood. Sterling Manor sat on a hill overlooking Harvard, and at a like a crown on a king's head. Stories of colonial architecture, white columns that gleamed in summer and collect in snow and winter, gardens that my mother maintained with the same ruthless efficiency she applied to her charity work. From the outside, it was the American dream crystallized in brick and mortar. From the inside, it was a mausoleum where we buried our roots. My father had built his empire the old-fashioned way, steel, sweat, and silence. Sterling precision manufacturing had been the backbone of Harvard's industrial district for 30 years, employing half the town at its peak. By the time I was old enough to understand what that meant, the factory had already closed, sold off to some conglomerate with a name that sounded like a threat. Vanguard Tech Industries. But the money remained, and with it, the illusion. Elena. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts like a scalpel through skin. You're not eating. I looked down at my plate. Prime rib bleeding onto mashed potatoes. Asparagus arranged like surgical instruments. 23 years old, in my final year at Yale Medical School, and I still felt like a child at this table. I'm fine, Mother, just thinking about my thesis. The Environmental Health Project. My sister's voice was honey over ice. Still tilting at windmills? Selena was 5 years older than me, and the difference showed in everything from her tailored Armani suit to the way she commanded a room without raising her voice. Where I was sharp angles and nervous energy, she was all curves and calculated poise. Our mother's daughter, people said, our father's pride. I was the question mark that didn't fit the family portrait. It's not tilting at windmills, I said. Why
public health research. Of course it is, darling. My father's voice carried that particular tone that meant the subject was closed. But perhaps after graduation, you might consider something more practical. Pediatrics, perhaps, or dermatology, something suitable for a sterling. Something that wouldn't ask me inconvenient questions even. I took a sip of wine to keep from responding. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of silver against china, until my father cleared his throat with the weight of an announcement. I've made a decision regarding the family estate. He set down his form with deliberate precision. Come spring, I'll be transferring the majority of assets to Selena. She's proven herself more than capable of managing the sterling legacy. My mother beamed.
Selena's expression didn't change. She had probably known this was coming for months. I felt nothing. I'd never wanted the money, never wanted the weight of a name built on foundations I didn't understand. But I saw something flicker in Selena's eyes when she looked at me. Not triumph. Fear. That should have been my first warning. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the guests had departed, there were always guests, always performances. I found myself unable to sleep. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that pressed against your eardrums and made you hear things that weren't there, or things that were. I was passing my father's study on the way to the kitchen when I heard his voice, low and urgent, filtering through the crack in the door. Arthur, I need you to handle this before spring. The files from 03, all of them. I can't have anything surfacing now, not with the transfer in motion. I froze.
Arthur Vance was our family lawyer, a man with silver hair and a smile that never reached his eyes.
The EPA sealed those records, came Arthur's gravelly response through the phone. But with the new administration, there's talk of reopening environmental cases. I can delay, but I can't make them disappear. Then delay, whatever it costs. Thomas, if your daughters start asking questions, they won't. Selena understands what's at stake, and Elena. My father's voice was heavy with something I couldn't name. Elena is focused on saving the world. Look in her own backyard. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Environmental cases, files that needed to disappear. I made it back to my room before the implications crashed over me like a wave. The Yale Medical Library became my sanctuary over the next few months.
while my classmates were celebrating the approach of graduation, I was buried in archives, following a thread I couldn't seem to let go. It started innocently enough. My thesis on environmental toxins and their impact on community health. Hartford was the perfect case study. An industrial town in transition, decades of manufacturing leaving their fingerprints in the soil, the water, the air itself. But when I started digging into the specific data for the Lower Basin neighborhood, the area downwind from where Sterling manufacturing used to stand, the numbers didn't add up.
23 cases of hepatocellular carcinoma between 2003 and 2006 in a population of just over 2,000 people. The statistical anomaly was so stark it practically screamed from the spreadsheet. Hepatocellular carcinoma, liver cancer, the kind associated with chronic exposure to heavy metals, the kind that didn't appear in clusters unless something was very, very wrong.
I cross-referenced with
EPA databases using the access my university credentials provided. Most of the files were public record, sanitized and safe, but buried in a footnote to a footnote, I found it. A preliminary investigation into hexavalent chromium levels in groundwater near the Sterling facility, dated April 2003. Preliminary, which meant it should have been followed by a full investigation, but there was nothing. The file simply stopped. I printed everything I could find, my hands shaking slightly as the pages emerged from the printer. Evidence of something, though I didn't yet know what. A pattern of disease, stopped investigation, my father's voice on the phone, the files from 2003, all of them, the pieces were there. I just didn't want to see the picture they made. March 2018 was an early thaw in Connecticut, melting the snow into rivers of slush that turned the city gray and uncertain.
I'd been carrying the printed files
In my bag for weeks, the weight of them growing heavier with each passing day. I couldn't go to my father, not yet, not until I understood what I was looking at. So I went to Selena, her office at Sterling Holdings, the investment firm she'd built for her father's money, occupied the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Hartford. The room and leather and floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were floating above the rest of the city. She was on the hall when I arrived, gesturing for me to sit while she finished negotiating something that involved millions and mergers and market shares. I waited, the folder heavy on my lap, watching my sister command the financial world with the same ease most people ordered coffee. When she finally hung up, her smile was warm but distracted. Elena, this is a surprise. Shouldn't you be studying for boards? I need to talk to you about something.
I placed the folder on her desk, my hands suddenly uncertain. About the family business, the old factory? The warmth in her expression froze just for a microsecond. Then it was back, perfectly calibrated. The factory's been closed for years. What about it? I've been doing research for my thesis. I opened the folder, spreading the pages
Across her immaculate desk. These are cancer rates for the Lower Basin neighborhood, and this is an EPA investigation that was opened and then closed. No explanation. Selena leafed through the papers, her manicured nails looking against the pages. When she looked up, her face was pale. Where did you get these? Public archives, medical records. It's all there, Selena. 23 people in 3 years. All the same cancer. All living in the same area. I leaned forward, needing her to understand. I think there was a leak from the factory, and I think someone covered it up.
exactly are you planning to do with this? I don't know yet. That's why I came to you first.
I thought maybe there's an explanation I'm missing. Maybe Dad didn't know how bad it was. Maybe you should leave this alone. I blinked. What? Selena stood, walking to the window with her arms crossed. Against the gray sky,
She looked like a figure in a painting, beautiful and untouchable. Do you know what happens if you take this public? If you start asking questions about a facility that closed 20 years ago? People get justice, families get compensation, the soil gets cleaned up, our family gets destroyed. She turned to face me, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Desperation. Everything Dad built, everything Mom has dedicated her life to, the foundation, the scholarships, the hospital wing with our name on it, all of it will be tainted. Will be the family that poisoned their own town.
Selena, if people died, it was 20 years ago. You can't bring them back by dragging us through the mud now. Her voice rose, then caught itself, smoothing back to that practiced calm. Elena, I know you want to save the world. It's what makes you you. But sometimes saving the world means destroying yourself in the process.
Is that really what you want? Gathering the papers with trembling hands. I thought you'd help me find the truth. The truth. Selena's laugh was hollow. The truth is that you're 23 years old, about to become a doctor with your whole life ahead of you. Don't throw it away playing detective with ancient history. It's not ancient history of people who are still getting sick. Then let the EPA handle it. Let the proper authorities. The proper authorities already buried it once. We stared at each other across the desk. The distance between us suddenly vast. I'd come to her as a sister, looking for an ally. But the woman looking back at me was someone else entirely. Someone who'd already made her choice. I left without another word. The folder tucked under my arm. The weight of it somehow different now. Heavier, more dangerous. I should have seen it then. The way Selena's hand shook as I walked out. The way she reached for her phone before I'd even made it to the elevator. I should have known that some families don't just hide their secrets. They defend them. 6 months later, on a September night that smelled of rain and endings, I made the mistake of thinking I was safe. My apartment was a shoebox in New Haven, close enough to the medical school for convenience, far enough from Hartford to feel like freedom. I'd been working on my EPA submission for weeks, building an airline case, medical data, environmental samples I'd collected myself, a timeline that connected the dots between Sterling Manufacturing and 23 dead people who deserve someone to speak for them.
I was going to turn it in the next morning.
I never got the chance. I woke to the sound of splintering wood, my bedroom door crashing open in an explosion of noise and darkness, flashlights in my eyes, hands grabbing my arms, voices shouting words that didn't make sense. Search warrant and suspected narcotics and don't resist. I was still in my pajamas when they cuffed me, still trying to understand what was happening as they tore through my apartment like a hurricane. One of them, a cop with a face like granite, emerged from my bathroom holding a plastic bag. Inside were pill bottles, at least a dozen, oxycodone, hydrocodone, fentanyl patches. I've never seen those before,
I said, my voice breaking on the words. Someone planted them. You have to believe me. Save it for your lawyer, Granite Face said. But my lawyer, when he finally arrived, wasn't who I expected. Arthur Vance walked into the holding cell at 3 a.m. wearing a suit that cost more than my rent.
His smile was thin and professional, the smile of a man who'd already won. Elena, what a mess you've gotten yourself into. Arthur, thank God you have to tell them this is a mistake. Someone broke into my apartment. They planted drugs. Did they also plant this? He slid a journal across the table between us. My journal. Or rather, a journal that looked like mine, with my handwriting, filled with entries about stealing medication from the hospital, about using, about needing more, always more. I stared at it, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. That's not mine. I never wrote any of this. The handwriting analysis says otherwise. He pulled out another document. As does your psychiatric history. My what? Your involuntary commitment at age 18, the suicide attempt, the diagnosis of bipolar disorder with psychotic features. He arranged the papers like evidence at a trial. It's all here, Elena, documented by Dr. Richard Morrison, who has been treating you for 5 years. I've never been committed. I've never even met Dr. Morrison. But even as I said it, I saw the signatures, the dates, the official seals that made it real. Your family has been very concerned about you, Arthur continued, his voice gentle now, almost kind. Your sister especially, she's been covering for you for months, trying to get you help, but the drug abuse, the paranoid delusions about your father's company, they're not delusions. It's all escalated to the point where, unfortunately, intervention is necessary. He stood, straightening his cuffs. The judge will likely mandate psychiatric evaluation, temporarily suspend your medical license pending treatment. It's for the best, really. You need help, Elena? I lunged across the table, but the chains brought me up short. This is a setup. Selena did this. My father... Your father, Arthur said quietly, is a man who built this town, who employs thousands, who gives millions to charity, and his daughter's accusing him of murder based on 20-year-old paperwork and a handful of coincidences. He leaned in close enough that I could smell his cologne. Do you think they're going to believe? The legal term is temporary incompetency determination. In practice, it means they can silence you without actually putting you in a straitjacket. I was released on my own recognizance, since I no longer recognized myself in the mirror, with orders to attend mandatory psychiatric evaluation and substance abuse treatment. My medical school put me on indefinite leave, pending resolution of legal matters. My apartment had been searched so thoroughly, it looked like a crime scene, and the submission I'd been preparing, gone. Every file, every printout, every carefully collected sample disappeared into evidence bags, or maybe into incinerators. It didn't matter. Without credentials, without credibility, I was just another unstable woman making accusations she couldn't prove. I called my mother from a payphone,
They'd confiscated my cell as evidence and asked her to come get me. She hung up without saying a word. So I called Selena, because I still stupidly hoped there was a part of my sister that hadn't been consumed by whatever we'd become.
You did this, I said when she answered. You planted the drugs. You created the psychiatric records. I saved you. Her voice was steady, certain. From yourself, from throwing away everything for a crusade that would have destroyed us all. People died, Selena. People die every day. That doesn't mean you get to sacrifice our family on the altar of your conscience. I'm your sister. You were my sister. There was something broken in her voice, something that might have been grief in another universe. Now you're a liability.
And Arthur says, if you try to pursue this, they'll put you somewhere you can't hurt yourself or us. The line went dead. I stood there in the November cold, still wearing the clothes I'd been arrested in, holding a phone that buzzed with dial tone. Around me, New Haven went about its business. Students hurrying to class, professionals grabbing coffee,
Life continuing its forward motion while mine ground to a halt. I had one option left. I called home. Thanksgiving dinner in Sterling Manor had always been a production. 3 courses, each perfectly timed. Extended family filling the long table. Conversation kept light, pleasant, safely removed from anything that might cause discomfort. This year, it was just the 4 of us. I knocked because my father had called. His voice gruff with something that might have been concern. Whatever's happened, he said, you're still my daughter. I'm home. So I came.
because I was 23 and scared, and I wanted to believe that blood still meant something.
The turkey was dry, the wine was expensive, the silence was suffocating. I want to show you something, I said finally, when the non-eating had gone on long enough. I pulled out the last copy I'd made, the one I'd hid in a friend's apartment, just in case. 23 death certificates, the preliminary reward. I'm showing the answer faster than could be explained by anything except the obvious. I spread them across the table between the gravy boat and the cranberry sauce. This is why I was asking questions. I said, not because I wanted to hurt you, because people were hurt, are still being hurt, and you have the power to make it right. My father looked at the papers the way someone might look at a spider, with distant disgust and the desire to crush it. My mother wouldn't look at all, but Selena looked right at me.
Show her what you showed me. Thomas Sterling, patriarch, philanthropist, pillar of the community,
Reached into his jacket and pulled out a folder of his own. He slid it across the table. Inside were photos. Me, passed out on a couch at a party I didn't remember attending. Me, accepting money from a man whose face was carefully blurred.
Me in a hospital gown, strapped to a gurney, my eyes wild with what could only be madness, all fake, all fabricated, all completely and utterly convincing. This is what Selena bought me 6 months ago, my father said, his voice like gravel. When you started asking questions, when you started threatening everything I built, he gathered the photos back up his hands, steady. broken, paranoid delusions.
She died screaming at people who weren't there, accusing us all of trying to poison her. He looked at me with something like pity. The disease runs in families. I don't have a disease. I have evidence of a crime you committed. Enough. The word cracked like a whip. You will not speak of this again, not to me, not to anyone. He stood, walking to the fireplace where a fire crackled cheerfully. He picked up my papers, my proof, my truth, and fed them to the flames. I watched my months of work curl into ash. You have two choices, he said, watching the papers burn. You can accept treatment, get clean, finish your medical degree somewhere far from Hartford, and never speak of this again. Or... He turned to face me, and his eyes were cold as the grave. Or you can keep fighting, keep accusing, and Arthur has assured me that the next psychiatric facility won't be voluntary, it won't be temporary, and it won't be somewhere you ever come back from. The room tilted. My mother was crying, quiet tears that she dabbed away with a napkin. Selena stared at her plate, her jaw tight. "You'd do that?" I whispered. You'd lock me away to keep your secrets?" "I'd do anything to protect this family." He came back to the table, standing over me like judgment itself. "You're not my daughter anymore. My daughter died when she chose strangers over her own blood." He pulled my medical school diploma from his jacket, the one that had hung in the study. The one I'd earned with 4 years of sleepless nights and sacrifice. He threw it into the fireplace with the rest. "Get out of my house." I left Sterling Manor in a snowstorm. With $200 my mother had slipped into my pocket when no one was looking. No car, no phone, no future. But as I walked down the long driveway, I looked back one last time. Selena was standing at her bedroom window, watching me go. Even from a distance, I could see her face, and what I saw there wasn't triumph. It was terror. I didn't understand it then. Didn't understand what it cost her to betray me, what price she'd paid in her own currency of fear and obligation. I would understand eventually. But first, I had to die. Not literally, not physically. But the girl who walked away from Sterling Manor that night, the one who still believed in justice, who thought truth could win against power, she died in the snow between there and the bus station. What survived was something else. Something harder, something that would spend the next 5 years sharpening itself into a blade. 5 years is long enough to become someone else. Long enough to learn that revenge isn't a hot emotion, it's cold, surgical,
Methodical. Long enough to understand that the best way to destroy your enemies isn't to fight them head on, but to position yourself so precisely that when they fall, it's by their own hand. Long enough to become exactly the weapon they were afraid of. The first year, I was nobody.
Elena Reeves, a name I borrowed from my maternal grandmother, the woman my father had mentioned, the one who died screaming. I worked 3 jobs in Boston while studying for the MCAT again. Waitressing nights, medical transcription from a coffee shop laptop, weekend shifts at a clinic in Roxbury where they didn't ask too many questions about gaps
In your resume, I was invisible, that was the point. The second year, I got into Boston University's accelerated MD program for students with non-traditional backgrounds. That's what they called people like me, the ones who'd fallen and were trying to climb back up. They told them I'd had a family crisis, medical leave. They nodded sympathetically until they dig deeper. I studied the way drowning people breathe, desperately and completely like nothing else existed. The third year I specialized trauma surgery, because if you're going to remake yourself into something sharp, you might as well learn to cut with precision.
The fourth year, I filed a lawsuit in Massachusetts, far from Connecticut, far from anyone who knew the Sterling name. Elena Sterling versus the Connecticut Board of Medical Examiners, challenging the psychiatric determination that had cost me my license. I had new evaluations, new doctors, new evidence. And I had something else: money. Anonymous donations to my legal fund from an account I couldn't trace but suspected came from somewhere with the name Margaret attached to it. The case took 11 months. When it was over, my record was expunged. My license was restored, and Elena Sterling, not Reeves, was free to practice medicine anywhere in the United States. The fifth year, I came home. Mercy Rest Memorial Hospital sat on the north side of Hartford, a sprawling complex of glass and steel that had been renovated 5 years ago with a generous donation from the Sterling Foundation. My mother's signature was probably on the dedication plaque. I didn't look at it as I walked in for my interview. Dr. Sterling, the chief of surgery, was a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen everything. Your credentials are impressive. Harvard undergrad, Yale Medical, BU for your MD, top marks in your trauma fellowship. But I have to ask, why Hartford? You could go anywhere. This is home, I said simply. And I believe in giving back to the community that raised me. It wasn't a lie. I was giving back, just not in the way she saw it. She hired me as an attendant. 6 months later, when the previous chief of trauma retired after a heart attack, she offered me his position. I was 32 years old and running the busiest trauma department in Connecticut. From my office window, I could see Sterling Manor on its hill. I wondered if they could see me. October 2024 came in cold and sharp, the kind of autumn that promised an early winter. I'd been chief for 4 months, long enough to establish routines, build trust, become part of the hospital's machinery. Long enough that when the call came at 2:47 a.m., I was already dressed and in my car before I'd fully processed what dispatch had said. Female, 33, MVA on E91 northbound. High-speed collision with barrier. GCS of 8. Massive internal bleeding. BP dropping. ETA 4 minutes. Motor vehicle accident. Glasgow coma scale of 8 meant serious head trauma. And I-91 northbound at this hour meant someone coming from the financial district, probably working late. I was in the trauma bay when they wheeled her in, already barking orders before I'd looked at the patient's face. Get me 2 units of ONAG, have the O-arm revved. I need a CT of the head and chest, and someone page neuro. I look down, I'm stunned. Under the blood, under the shattered glass embedded in her skin, under the swelling that had already
already begun to distort her features. It was Selena, my sister.
My destroyer, my ghost. Dr. Sterling, one of the residents was staring at me. Orders. I could kill her right now. Let my hand slip during intubation. Miss a bleeder. Code her wrong. Accidents happened in trauma all the time. The chaotic nature of emergency medicine was a perfect cover for 1,000 small ways to let someone die. 5 years of planning, and fate had delivered her to me on a stretcher. My hands didn't shake as I reached for the laryngoscope. "Let's save her life," I said. The surgery took 6 hours. Ruptured spleen, lacerated liver, fractured ribs that had punctured a lung, internal bleeding that kept finding new places to pool, like her body was determined to
Empty itself. I worked with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb. Every suture perfect, every clamp precise. My team moved around me like instruments in an orchestra. I was conducting toward a single purpose, keeping Selena Sterling alive. Not because I loved her.
Because I needed her conscious. She's stable, I finally said as we closed. Move her to ICU, keep her sedated until the swelling goes down. I want hourly neurochecks and full labs every 4 hours. Dr. Sterling, the scrub nurse hesitated. The patient, is she related to you? Same last name. No relation, I said, stripping off my gloves.
Just a coincidence. It was 9 a.m. when I finally left the OR. I should have gone home, showered, slept, but instead I went to the lab because something had been bothering me during surgery. Something wrong that had nothing to do with the accident. I'd seen a lot of traumatic injuries in 5 years. I knew what fresh damage looked like, and I knew what chronic damage looked like. The kind that built up over months, years, slowly destroying from the inside. Selena's spleen hadn't just been ruptured by the impact. It had been diseased, enlarged, friable, already failing before the crash. I pulled her blood work from the system, spreading the results across my desk like tarot cards reading a future that had already been written. AST 2,847 units per liter. Normal 10 to 40. ALT 3,201 units per liter. Normal 7 to 56. Total bilirubin 15.3 milligrams per deciliter. Normal 0.1 to 1.2. Her liver was dying, had been dying for months, maybe years. But why? I ran heavy metal panels, toxicology screens, every test I could think of without raising red flags about why I was so interested in a random MBA patient. The results came back as chromium-6, 187 micrograms per liter. Anything over 30 was dangerous. Over 100 was lethal given enough time. Cadmium, 68 micrograms per liter. Lead, 134 micrograms per liter. I stared at the numbers, my coffee going cold in my hand. These weren't accidental exposure levels. This was chronic, sustained poisoning. The kind you got from living downstream of an
industrial waste for decades, or from being the daughter of a man who buried his contamination and built his mansion on top of it.
Selena had been drinking from poisoned wells her whole life. We both had, but she'd stayed. She'd inherited the house, the legacy, the throne built on toxic ground, and it was killing her. I should have felt vindicated. Poetic justice, the golden child dying from the very corruption she protected. But all I felt was cold certainty settling in my chest like ice. Because of the exposure was this high in Selena, who lived in the manor on the hill. One must be like for the people in Lower Basin, the ones who lived there for generations, drinking from wells that connected to the same aquifer, breathing air that blew across the same contaminated soil. I'd found 23 cancer cases 5 years ago. How many more were there now? My hands were shaking when I pulled out Selena's phone, the one that he had bagged with her personal effects. Rock screen, but functional. I shouldn't have. Violations, invasion of privacy, a dozen regulations I was breaking.
But I needed to understand. Her email was still logged in. I scrolled through, looking for anything that might explain why she'd been on I-91 at 2 a.m., driving fast enough to hit a barrier with fatal force. There, sent at 11:43 p.m., less than an hour before the crash. To Arthur Vance. Subject: no more. Arthur, I know what you've been doing, what you've been making me do. I'm dying, Arthur. The same poison that killed those people in Lower Basin. It's in me. In my blood, in my bones. The doctors say I have maybe a year if I'm lucky. You told me we were protecting the family. You told me Elena was dangerous, but you lied. You've been using us, using me, to cover up Vanguard Tech's liability. The buyout contract you made my father sign included a clause indemnifying them from any historical contamination claims. You made him complicit in exchange for a payout, then used that complicity to keep him silent. And when Elena started asking questions, you made her look crazy because the last thing you needed was a medical professional with a grudge digging into cancer clusters. I'm going to the FBI tomorrow morning. I have copies of everything, the real environmental reports, the payoff schedules, the shell companies you use to funnel cleanup costs back into your own pocket. I'm done being your accomplice. I'm done dying for your profit margin, Selena. The email showed draft not sent. She'd never had the chance to hit send. I looked at the timestamp again, 11:43 p.m. The crash was reported at 2:14 a.m., 2.5 hours. Plenty of time for someone monitoring her emails. And Arthur Vance absolutely had that capability to arrange an accident. My sister hadn't crashed. She'd been run off the road. I was still staring at the phone when it buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. I answered without thinking.
Dr. Sterling. Arthur Vance's voice was silk over razors.
I understand my goddaughter is under your care. How fortuitous. How did you get this number?
I make it my business to know things. For instance, I know you've been reviewing Selena's medical files quite thoroughly. The lab work, the toxicology panels. Very thorough for a routine trauma case. Ice crawled up my spine. Are you having me monitored? Let's just say certain people are very interested in ensuring that Selena's accident doesn't lead to uncomfortable questions. Questions about environmental exposure, for instance, or about why a young woman with no history of substance abuse might have such unusual heavy metal levels in her blood. Are you threatening me? I'm reminding you that you've built a very impressive career in the 5 years since your unfortunate incident. Chief of Trauma at 32. Quite remarkable. It would be a shame if questions about your own mental health history resurfaced.
If people started wondering whether
Someone with documented psychiatric issues should be making life and death decisions. My hands tightened on the phone. You can't touch me. I was exonerated. More records can be sealed. They can also be unsealed, especially if new evidence comes to light suggesting instability, obsessive behavior toward patients, unauthorized access to medical files, infant violations. His voice dropped. Elena, you're a smart woman, smart enough to know that some battles can't be won. Walk away. Treat Selena professionally. Don't dig into things that don't concern you. And we'll all pretend this conversation never happened. And if I don't, then you'll find yourself way back where you were 5 years ago. Only this time, there won't be anyone to pull you back out. The line went down. I sat there in my office, listening to my heart hammer against my ribs. He was right. I built my career on a foundation of redemption, one scandal away from collapse.
He had the resources, the connections, the will to destroy me, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd reminded me that I had nothing left to lose. They came at 7 p.m. when visiting hours were in full swing and the hospital was crowded with families and flowers and get-well balloons. I saw them from my office, Thomas and Margaret Sterling, walking into Mercy Rest like they owned it, which in a sense they did. Their foundation's donation had paid for the new trauma wing after all. My mother looked older, thinner. Her hair was more gray than blonde now, her face mapped with lines that hadn't been there 5 years ago. My father looked exactly the same, immovable, eternal, a monument to his own certainty. They didn't see me as they headed toward the ICU, but I saw them. And I saw the moment they stopped at the nurse's station, confused because the name on the board said Chief of Trauma, Dr. E. Sterling. I gave them 10 minutes with Selena, long enough to see their daughter pale and intubated, monitors beeping her continued existence. Before I walked in, the look on my mother's face when she saw me was worth 5 years of exile. Hello, mother, father. I didn't smile. I'm Dr. Sterling. I'll be overseeing your daughter's care. Margaret made a sound like something breaking. My father's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jump. You, he said. Me. I closed the door behind me, suddenly very aware that we were alone, just the 4 of us and Selena's unconscious body. Surprised? You shouldn't be. You taught me that Sterlings always come home. What are you doing here? Margaret's voice trembled. How are you? You can't be her doctor. The conflict of interest is noted in her chart. I disclosed our relationship immediately. Hospital counsel cleared it. I picked up Selena's chart, flipping through it with professional detachment. Though I suppose relationship is a strong word for people who haven't spoken in 5 years. Elena. My father's voice carried command, even here, even now. Whatever you're planning. I looked up, letting confusion color my voice. I'm not planning anything. I'm treating my patient. Your daughter suffered massive internal trauma.
In what appears to be a single vehicle accident, we've stabilized her, but she's not out of danger. Then treat her and leave, he said. We'll arrange for her transfer to a different hospital. I wouldn't recommend that. Moving her in her current condition could be fatal. And besides, I pulled out the lab results, laying them across the bedside table like playing cards. There are some concerning findings I need to discuss with you as our next review. Margaret looked at the papers with the wariness of someone who'd learned not to trust written evidence. What findings? Your daughter is dying, I said flatly.
The accident may have brought her here, but it's not what's killing her. She has acute and chronic liver failure caused by heavy metal toxicity, specifically hexavalent chromium, cadmium, and lead. The color drained from my father's face. That's impossible, he said. The manner is tested annually, is it? I pulled out my phone, calling up the email I'd found. Or do you just pay people to say it's tested? Because according to the exposure levels in Selena's blood, she's been drinking from a contaminated source for years, decades possibly. I watched him process it, watched the moment he understood what I was really saying. You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You're trying to. This is revenge for what, Father, for destroying my life, for having me declared mentally incompetent, for burning my diploma in your fireplace. I stepped closer, dropping the clinical detachment.
Or maybe for poisoning your own town and letting 23 people die to protect your bottom line? Elena, please. Margaret reached for me, but I stepped back. Don't touch me. My voice was ice. You made your choice 5 years ago. You chose this family's reputation over your daughter. You chose silence over truth, and now? I gestured to Selena. Now you get to watch what that choice looks like. Your perfect daughter, your heir, your golden child dying from the same poison you helped bury. This isn't... We didn't know. My mother was crying now, ugly tears that smeared her makeup. We thought the cleanup was handled, Arthur said. Arthur Vance is a criminal who's been using our
Family as cover while he embezzles cleanup funds from Vanguard. I pulled out printed copies of Selena's draft emails, throwing them on the bed. Your daughter figured it out. She was going to turn him in, and someone. I read my father's eyes. Made sure he never got the chance.
The silence was broken only by the mechanical wheeze of Selena's ventilator. What do you want? My father finally asked. And there it was, the question I'd been waiting 5 years to hear. I pulled out 2 documents from my bag, placing them deliberately on the rolling table beside Selena's bed. Document A, I said, tapping the first.
A full confession to the EPA and regarding the 2003 environmental violations of Sterling Manufacturing includes complete records of the contamination, the cover-up, and the payoff. Names every official you bribed, every report you buried, every life you traded for profit. Comes with a comprehensive victim compensation plan funded by liquidating Sterling Holdings and establishing a trust for affected families. My father's face went purple. That would destroy everything. Not even me. I'd have the second medical consent form for living donor liver transplantation.
Specifically, a partial liver transplant from a compatible blood relative to Selena. Margaret looked between the documents, confused. What are you saying? I'm saying your daughter needs a new liver, and I'm offering mine. The shock on their faces was gratifying. My mother whispered, after everything she did to you. I'm not doing it out of love, I said coldly. I'm doing it because I want Selena to live. I want her to wake up every day for the rest of her life and remember that she's only alive because the sister she destroyed gave her a piece of her own body. I want her to carry my DNA in her veins, my cells dividing in her liver, keeping her alive when by all rights she should be dead. I looked at my father, letting him see the calculation in my eyes. But I'm not performing this transplant for free. You want your daughter to survive. You sign document A, you confess, you name names, you make restitution, and then, only then, I'll give her a piece of myself. This is extortion, he breathed. This is justice, I corrected. You taught me that actions have consequences, that power means making hard choices. Well, here's your choice. Your daughter's life for the truth, your legacy for her future. I pulled out a pen, clicking it once. The sound was very loud in the quiet room. You have 60 seconds before Selena's oxygen saturation drops below critical levels. Her liver is failing, and without intervention, she'll be dead in 72 hours. No hospital will transplant her in time. The waiting list is months long, and her condition makes her a poor candidate. But I can do it right here, right now, if you sign. You're bluffing, my father said. You wouldn't let her die. Watch me. I walked to the door, hand on the handle. I spent 5 years learning that the only difference between a surgeon and a murderer is intent. I can save her, or I can document her decline as a natural progression of disease. Your choice, honest. My mother grabbed his arm, her voice desperate. Sign it! Just sign it! I can't lose her! I can't! If I sign this, the Sterling name is already dead, Margaret screamed. Your pride killed it when you buried those reports. Your greed killed it when you took Vanguard Tech's money. Just sign the damn paper and save our daughter. I watched my father age a decade in 10 seconds. Watched the monument crack. Watched the king realize his kingdom was built on bones. He picked up the pen with shaking hands. I need guarantees, he said, that if I sign this, you'll actually
You're in no position to negotiate. I gestured to Selena. Sign or watch her die. Those are your options. The pen hovered over the paper.
Why, he asked, looking up at me with something that might have been pain in a man capable of that emotion. Why are you really doing this? I thought about lying, about telling him it was purely tactical, purely revenge.
But 5 years of being someone else had taught me the value of truth. Because someone has to stop pretending, I said quietly. Someone has to look at the damage we've done and call it what it is. And maybe if Selena survives this, if she wakes up with my liver keeping her alive and your confession destroying everything you built,
maybe then she'll understand what you never could. What's that? That some legacies are worth burning down. He signed. The pen scratched across the paper with the sound of an empire ending. My mother signed as witness, her tears falling onto the document like water on a grave. I took the papers, folded them carefully, and tucked them into my bag. Or his breath was 6 a.m. tomorrow, I said. I'll perform the extraction first, then the transplant. Estimated surgery time is 8 hours. Assuming no complications, we should both survive. My mother's voice cracked. Surgery is with, I said, but then so is silence.
and I left them there with their dying daughter and their signed confession, walking out of the ICU with my head high and my hands steady. In the hallway, Marcus Chen was waiting. Whatever just happened in there, he said quietly. I hope you know what you're doing. I'm cutting out the cancer, I told him. Even if it means cutting out a piece of myself to do it. 5 years is long enough to become someone else. Long enough to learn that revenge isn't hot. It's cold, surgical, methodical. Long enough to transform pain into precision. I became Dr. Elena Sterling again, through lawsuits and new credentials, working my way from Boston back to Hartford. When Mercy Rest Memorial hired me
as chief of trauma, I could see Sterling Manor from my office window. I wondered if they could see me. Then October 2024 brought Selena to my ear on a stretcher, broken and bleeding, and I had a choice. Let her die or save her to face the truth. I chose surgery.
6 hours of perfect precision, keeping her alive when every instinct screamed to let her go. But when I ran her labs, I found something that changed everything. The chapel at Mercy Rest was empty at midnight when my mother found me. She was holding something wrapped in leather, a journal, old and worn. I started keeping this the day your father told me about the spill, Margaret said, sitting 3 years back. April 15th, 2003. Chemical leaks eroded, leaked into groundwater, 8 million things, money we didn't have. She opened it, showing pages of cramped handwriting, dates, names, amounts. I documented everything, every meeting with Arthur, every bribe to inspectors, every time Vanguard had promised to clean up and didn't deliver. Her voice cracked. 20 years of cowardice in my own hand. I told myself I was keeping records for protection, but really, I was building evidence because I knew silence was murder. He held it out to me. Why now, I asked. Because 6 months ago, Selena got sick, the same poison we pretended didn't exist. It's killing my daughter. Tears streamed down her face. I waited for someone strong enough to use this. Someone who'd lost enough that threats meant nothing. I took the journal. Inside were entries that made my blood run cold. June 8th, 2019.
Elena asking questions. Selena terrified. Arthur has a plan to neutralize the threat. I should have warned her. I stayed silent. October 20th, 2024. Selena going to FBI tomorrow. Has evidence against Arthur. I'm terrified he'll kill her. October 21st, 2024. Selena in hospital. Accident. Elena is her doctor.
God help us all. My mother had given me a weapon, but more than that, she'd shown me why Selena betrayed me, not from malice, from terror of Arthur, of losing everything, of a father, daughter, that family loyalty, men protecting secrets at any cost. We'd both been victims. I'd just been cast out while Selena was trapped inside.
At 5 a.m., I went to see my sister.
Selena's sedation had been lightened. Her eyes flickered, fighting toward consciousness. I took her hand. I forgive you, I said quietly. Not because what you did was okay, but because I understand now. You were drowning too. You just stood on my shoulders to breathe. Her fingers twitched. I'm giving you my liver tomorrow, not out of love. I don't know if I can anymore, but because you deserve a chance to become someone different. I leave to love. And because when you wake up with myself keeping you alive, you'll never forget that the sister you destroyed saved you anyway. Her eyelids fluttered. I'm back, Selena. Come back and help me burn it all down. Selena woke at 20 hours before surgery. When our parents left us alone, I told her everything. The lab results showing her poisoning, the timeline we had left. Without transplants, days, with potentially decades. Donating.
The shock on her face was absolute.
Why? Because Dad signed a confession for your life. Because Mom gave me evidence. Because you were going to the FBI before someone ran you off the road. I leaned forward. Because we're both poisoned, Selena. You just stayed close enough to die faster. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I know I read your draft email. I pulled out a USB drive from her personal effects. Want to tell me what's on this? Everything. Strength returned to her voice. 7 years of emails. Financial records showing Arthur's embezzlement. Audio of him threatening Dad, threatening me. The Vanguard tech knew and covered it up. I plugged it in. Hundreds of files loaded. Evidence of a conspiracy spanning through decades. I played one recording. Arthur's voice. Make Elena go away. Threatening her. When she tells her story, nobody can believe her. Young Selena, what do you want me to do? Make her disappear. I don't care how. I stopped the recording.
My hands shook. He said I'd thank you one day, Selena whispered. I believed him because I was a coward. Because sacrificing you was easier than risking everything. And now you've lost everything anyway. Yes. Her eyes held hollow clarity. So I might as well take him down with me. I texted my FBI contact, someone from Boston who'd been hunting Vanguard
tech for years. Within minutes, warrants being drafted, arrest teams moving 0600. Do not tip anyone off. He's going to fight, Selena said. He also has evidence of 47 deaths. No lawyer can make that disappear. I checked her vitals. Get rest. Tomorrow we both go under the knife. Thank you, she whispered, for not letting me die. Thank me by living and telling the truth every single morning. The surgery began at 6:03 a.m. I didn't know that FBI agents were simultaneously arresting Arthur Vance as he tried to board a private jet to the Caymans.
By the time I learned he'd been caught, I was already unconscious. Dr. Marcus Chen removing 60% of my liver. The human liver regenerates. Remove 70%. It grows back. The donor recovers. The recipient lives. It's the closest thing to medical resurrection we have, but resurrection requires sacrifice. I remember Marcus's face above me. The anesthesiologist counting backward, cold propofol in my veins. I remember thinking, this is where I stop being the victim. Then nothing. I woke to pain, deep, grinding, intentional, my abdomen carved open and sewn around emptiness. Surgery perfect, Marcus said. Selena's transplant successful, liver function improving. You saved her. I closed my eyes, saved her, gave her a part of myself that would keep her alive long after I was gone. We were bound now. She carried my DNA, my cells dividing in her body. The FBI was here, Marcus added quietly. They arrested 7 people, including your father. I know, I whispered. The story broke while I was recovering. Hartford environmental scandal. Decades of cover-up, exposed Vanguard tech, Sterling family implicated in contamination, deaths. My name was everywhere. The media had it backward, but I didn't care. The truth was in the evidence. The bodies finally counted. My mother came on day 3, shattered and makeupless. They're saying you planned this to destroy us. I came back to practice medicine. Everything else you did to yourselves. Your father's in prison. 20 years minimum. He'll die there. 47 people died from his poison. He should be grateful he gets old age. She flinched. How can you be so cold? You threw me away 5 years ago, declared me insane. You don't get to appeal to family loyalty now. I pointed to the door. If you want absolution, try the chapel. I'm proud of you, she whispered, for being stronger than I was. I don't want your pride. I want you to testify against Dad, against Arthur. Against everyone who knew. I held her gaze. That's what might earn forgiveness. She nodded, tears
streaming. Okay, I'll testify. Everything. 6 months later, I stood before a grand jury. The courtroom packed with victims' families, 47 confirmed dead, 38 more under investigation. My name is Dr. Elena Sterling, Chief of Trauma Surgery at Mercy Rest Memorial, also the daughter of Thomas Sterling, defendant in this case. I told them everything, the contamination
people who paid, I said, holding up anonymized medical files. A mother of three, a 15-year-old boy, a grandfather who lived in lower basin his entire life, and my sister who would have died at 33 if I hadn't given her part of my liver. Silence filled the room. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to speak for people who can't anymore, who say their lives matter.
That they deserved clean water and honest government. I looked at my mother. I'm here to say that silence is complicity, and complicity is killing us.
The verdicts came in waves. Arthur Vance, life without parole. Vanguard, tech executives. Collective 200 years.
My father, 15 years, eligible for parole in 10. He'd confessed, cooperated, testified. My mother, immunity for testimony. Selena, not charged, moved to Seattle, started over. We talk sometimes, awkward calls about liver function, carefully avoiding everything else. She's alive, that's what matters. The award ceremony came on an old November evening, exactly 5 years after my exile. Connecticut Medical Association's Physician of the Year. I almost did it again, but the victims' families needed to see the speaking of didn't always end in ruin. The applause was thunderous when I accepted. I'm not a hero, I said into the microphone. I exposed the conspiracy because I was angry, because I'd been silenced and wanted to scream. The room shifted uncomfortably. The real heroes fought this before me. Families intimidated into silence.
Journalists threatened with litigation. EPA inspectors fired for doing their jobs. I held up the $5,000 check. I'm donating this to the Sterling Foundation for Toxic Exposure Victims, established from my family's liquidated assets. I paused, letting silence stretch. People ask if I've forgiven my family, found peace or closure. The answer is no, I haven't forgiven, haven't found peace, and I don't think closure is real when damage is permanent. Someone gasped. What I've found is purpose. Pain transformed into power if you carry it long enough. Silence is a choice. Speaking up is a choice. Both have consequences, but only one lets you sleep at night. I looked at the families. My father taught me legacy is what we leave behind. He was wrong. Legacy isn't what we leave, it's what we clean up. The poison we stop burying. The truth we finally tell, even when it costs everything. The applause started slowly, building like a wave. The family stood first, then everyone joined until the ballroom was on its feet. I stood with my hollow victory and thought, this is justice, not satisfying, not clean, just necessary. A week later, my father's letter arrived from prison. Elena, I watched your speech. You were right about everything. I spent 40 years building an empire on lies.
You taught me that real power is admitting you were wrong. I won't see freedom again. But before I die, I want you to know I'm proud of you. You became everything I pretended to be. You're the only legacy worth preserving. I love you. I'm sorry, Dad. I read it 3 times, then filed it in my desk beside the childhood photo of Selena and me. I didn't write that. Maybe someday. Maybe I'd visit before he died. Or maybe some distance stay unbridged. But I have the letter. Because living with complexity, understanding people can be both victim and villain. That takes strength.
2 years later, I stood before another contaminated site in Pennsylvania. Poor immigrant families told their health problems were genetic, not environmental. They'd contacted the Sterling Foundation for help investigating the steel plant that had closed 20 years ago. I looked at the old factory, the no trespassing signs, the buried chemicals.
I opened my medical bag, water testing kits, legal forms, contacts for environmental lawyers. I thought about my father in prison, Selena in Seattle, my mother rebuilding from wreckage. I thought about 47 people who died because someone chose profit over truth. And I got to work, because this is what I do now, finding where powerful people bury their sins, performing surgery, cutting out cancer, exposing what they hide. It's not revenge anymore. This is healing, one side at a time, one community at a time, one truth at a time. My name is Dr. Elena Sterling, and I'm just getting started.
Thank you for staying with me through Elena's journey. If this story resonated,
If you believe silence is complicity and truth is worth fighting for, please subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Some legacies are worth burning down. Others are worth building from the ashes. Until next time.